husband, but he has a little bit of a belly and, and he's older, but he gets up in the morning and gets in the mirror and he's like, oh, just like no shirt on and just how admiring himself. And he's like, yeah, I look great today.
See Beneath Your Beautiful podcast is raw and intimate, sometimes funny, and always entertaining. With new episodes every Saturday, Hara explores our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
I'm Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. I am the founder of the Career Rebel Academy and the Midlife Rebel community. I am a career and personal brand strategist, and I work with high-achieving, high-performing women at midlife to really take back control of their career and their life, to find what they're meant to do in the world and to boldly and confidently step into that work and to leave a legacy and the impact that only that they can make in the world.
I've been doing a little research on you and your your history is vast, or your knowledge is vast. You were a lawyer at one point.
I was a labor and employment attorney for about 10 years, practiced in Chicago and here in the Northwest, and then became an organizational consultant and worked with organizations on diversity development and organizational development and coaching and training leaders and emerging leaders and creating programs to support them in that regard. And when I finished my doctorate, I moved into academia, first teaching leadership and things of that nature in various programs, and then became the director of a couple of graduate programs before I moved into becoming an associate dean. So I spent another several years in that life before, at the precipice of my own 50th birthday, so I was around 48 or 9, I decided to branch out and start my own business. I had been doing a lot of researching and writing around women and how they discover who they are. Part of my focus in my doctorate program was on gender and identity development and how we as women define who we are, an antithesis of all the patriarchy and the messages that we get, so that we really can tap into who we are and how that impacts how we figure out what we want to do and plays out in organizational settings. So I was tired of researching and writing about it and thought, I really want to work with women. I want to connect with them and help them take control and be more the directors of their lives. And particularly as women in midlife, we seem to have found that we've been operating on autopilot and not doing things that we want. At that point, we either have kids or families or aging parents, and there seems to be so many more responsibilities than there are personal priorities. And I just really want to be an advocate or a voice for helping women choose themselves first, because then they can give back to other people if they so choose. And that's just become a passion of mine.
Did you start doing that by talking about fashion and clothing and then delve deeper?
After spending all of that time as an attorney and doing the work that I was doing, I wanted to do something that wasn't so heavy.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something that felt lighter and easier, but still about helping women show up as their best selves.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always loved fashion and image and things of that nature. And so I initially started that route. And so I got certified in image consulting. But interestingly, as I was going through that certification, there's 3 components of it. It's your appearance is one, but also how you show up, how you communicate, how you present yourself is a whole nother portion of it. And so I was really fascinated about working with entrepreneurial women and women in leadership who wanted to show up more powerfully, to get their message across, attract their right clients, and to feel more powerful at what they did. So I started that way. But interestingly enough, to do that work, from my perspective, it really starts with the understanding of self.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with, how do you want to present yourself to the world? And you only know that. It's not that someone can tell you. It's not that somebody can put something on you and you'll feel better.
Mm-hmm.
It's about you knowing how you want to show up and finding the right things that support that.
Yeah.
And through that process of doing that internal digging, I also got certified in feng shui and looking at energy and how energy moves. And usually it's looked upon at the movement of energy in a space, but we're energy. And so what I was looking at was how do you put things on your body that supports your energy, that makes you feel more confident, that makes you feel more alive, that makes you feel more of yourself. But you have to understand what that energy is to know how to marry the right thing to it. And in those conversations that I was having with women, they weren't clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was having these conversations about, well, tell me about what you want to do and your vision and, your goals and things of that nature, and tell me about yourself and what brings you to life and so on and so forth. So many of my clients couldn't answer those questions.
Yeah.
They either were unhappy where they were, they weren't sure where they wanted to go next. And many of them reached out to me because of this lack of clarity,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that this would help, that, well, I just need to jazz my look up a little bit and I'll feel better, as opposed to answering those deeper questions. And as we started to work through those questions and get those answers, I found that I loved that work much better and found it much more powerful. And even though I still do the visual branding and the image work with my clients as part of the longer term process, this beginning work of really understanding all your superpowers, your gifts, your vision, your goals, how do you want to be in the world, and really unfolding your purpose and your passion and the impact that you are here to make. Once we do that, then we can map everything else to that. But that work to me fits back into even what I studied in my doctoral work and everything that really mattered to me and what was important to me, most of my life. So I started that path, but it definitely evolved into what I'm doing now. Yeah.
I met you because you were a speaker at FierceCon. Actually, I went to that on a whim and I got a lot out of it. I met some beautiful people and it changed the trajectory of my life. So I'm really fascinated with you helping women transition in their careers, because the week before I went to FierceCon, I went to another conference in Toronto. And between those 2 weekends, I rekindled my passion for photography. And without all of that, I would never be doing a podcast.
I was in a car accident some time ago. I remembered a drunk driver was coming at me. It was going to hit the car. And I heard a voice that said, turn now. I remember at the time thinking, well, turn where? Because it was a 2-lane hill, in fact, and one would have been off the side of the hill and the other would have been in oncoming traffic. But I turned into oncoming traffic, and this would save my life, because had I not made a turn, the driver would have hit me head on and I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up hitting the passenger side, which caused some severe damage, and I had some issues. But the point is that I think a lot of women in particular at midlife, I think most people do, but definitely I relate to women at midlife, have something in them, a voice, a whisper, a feeling, an inkling, something that's like, this isn't all there is to it. This isn't what I'm meant to do. Mm-hmm. Is this how I'm going to wake up every day? Or something in them that's saying, turn, do something different. And for me, I related to that accident, that the turn is the option to really lean into what really brings you to life, what really sparks your passion, really what you're meant to do. But because we take the practical route, or we followed a certain path for so long, and it feels like, oh, I'm too old, or it's too late, or I'm crazy to shift now, mm-hmm. that we just stay in that lane going straight forward, because the options to the left or the right, like they were for me in the car, don't seem very optimal.
Right.
So, or seem crazy or too extreme. So we just stay the course. We die, in my opinion, emotionally and spiritually by not leaning into what it is that we were meant to do. And we don't impact people in the way that we could, mm-hmm. if we were to step into and listen to that voice that says, do something different. And I think the call gets just louder and stronger for women at midlife.
Yeah.
But that's when the risk is harder, right? Because you are older, you have these other responsibilities, or so many other considerations, these options that seem like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. But it's amazing to me, just when you do make the turn, it's like all of a sudden life opens up to you and opportunities open up to you. And one thing leads to the other. And it's like, man, had I not made the turn, I would not be doing what I'm doing now or where I'm at today.
Right. I can't even believe that this is where I'm at just in that short time, because I kept wondering, I kept worrying, who's going to believe me? I felt like such an imposter about how can I just be a graphic designer for 30 years and all of a sudden be a photographer? Who's going to believe me?
Mm-hmm.
Mike Myers said, I still believe that at any time, the no talent police will come and arrest me.
Exactly.
The producer of Batman movies says, I still have this background feeling that one of the security guards might come and throw me out. And Seth Godin talks about being an imposter and that he says everybody's an imposter. Otherwise, you're not doing good enough work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I love turning it on its head. I'm supposed to be an imposter. I'm actually doing the work I'm supposed to be doing if I feel this way.
Right. That's exactly right. And what I love too is that there's some idea that there's one thing that we should be doing in the world.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest fallacy there is that we go after this thing I'm supposed to know to do. And even if we did something in our 20s and 30s that we did like to do and we're good at, it doesn't mean that as we grow and progress and change and our interests change and our lives change, that what we do won't change as well.
Right.
And I think whenever we're doing something that we love to do, that we're passionate about doing, that we're in purpose, we have to give ourselves that permission to allow, as we grow and change in the lifespan, that what we're interested in and what we want to do may grow and change in the lifespan.
Did you feel like it would be hard to go from a lawyer to what you're doing now? I mean, how did that work out for you?
I transitioned from law to organizational consulting to academia.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those seemed respectable, doable. They made sense, right?
Yeah.
Leaving academia to do this,
Mm-hmm.
it gave me heart palpitations. I mean, there was a constant, like, what am I doing? It was such a stressful event to let go of that, because what I realized is that I was letting go of an identity.
Mm-hmm.
Not just an identity that I wrapped myself around, but an identity that others have wrapped me into as well. People like to identify you by what you do,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to who you are. It's one of the most powerful things I think we've witnessed in watching Simone Biles at the Olympics and Naomi Osaka, at tennis, of people claiming that I'm not what I do. I'm a person. And I have to do what's right for me, not for what everybody else thinks. So it felt irresponsible. It felt foolish. It felt that I was throwing away years of education and the money that was spent on that, and just on and on and on, all the stuff that was going on in my mind. What you said is so true, that as soon as I said yes to me and let go of all of that, it was like a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
It was like everything opened up to me in a way that never would have happened had I kept my fists closed and just bared down to say, no, that's foolish for me to do it.
Right.
It definitely was a struggle, because it was me breaking out of this identity of who I thought I was and really embracing who I really am.
I don't know if you remember that I came up to you after your speech, but truthfully, the only thing I remember now is you talking about women being self-conscious and your husband looking at himself in the mirror and being like, yeah, I'm all that.
He still does. Yeah. Well, I had read a study. Women will wake up and find 22 things wrong with themselves in the morning. Like, they'll look in the mirror and be like, oh, my eyes, or, oh, where did that flab come from? Or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case is, we'll look in the mirror every morning and find at least 22 things that we don't like. And just how horrible it is to start a day just picking yourself apart. Like, how can you go out there being your best self? How can you go out there being confident and self-assured and go for what you want when you're starting the day already, like, picking yourself apart and saying why you're not either good enough or whatever, smart enough or good looking enough, whatever the case is. And that we should be more like my husband, who, I love my husband, but he has a little bit of a belly, and, and he's older, but he gets up in the morning and gets in the mirror and he's like, oh, just like no shirt on, and just how admiring himself. And he's like, yeah, I look great today. It's crazy to me how we as women are so hard on ourselves, but how men are so forgiving. They will look, and they're losing their hair, whatever it is, they'll still think, yeah, I still got it. Whereas we would get like one gray hair and think, oh, it's over, or whatever it is, whatever our thing is that we have. And so that we have to have a little bit more of that grace for ourselves and to look for the things that we do love, because men will bypass the things that don't look good and focus on, well, at least my arms are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
But we'll focus on the opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Things can be amazing, but we'll focus on the things that aren't. And so we just need to kind of shift that perspective.
And have you always been confident, or is this something you learned?
This is something I've learned because my mom was a petite woman. And so I always was very self-conscious because I was taller and thicker than her. She was always this dainty, petite woman in my mind. So I'd always compared myself to her and been really conscious of the fact that I felt like an Amazon. So I've always felt like a bigger girl, even though I didn't gain really weight until after I had my kids. So I never struggled. I wasn't like the fat girl or anything like that. I mean, I played volleyball and I was popular. I wasn't dowdy or thought I was unattractive or that type of thing, but I definitely was self-conscious, and where I probably could have been wearing a bikini to the beach, I would cover up and, things of that nature. So I definitely felt like I wasn't as pretty as some other girls, or like as what I thought my mother was. So I definitely had some issues around that, and not being as vocal or as out there or as strong growing up. So there were definitely some times that I could have spoken up or been more self-assured of myself that I wasn't. And then going through a divorce made it worse. In my 30s, after my first husband and I separated, he was unfaithful to me and having kids. And my 30s were hard times for me during that. And my self-esteem plummeted dramatically from that. And so it wasn't until moving into my 40s that I started to do this kind of reclamation. I think it coincided with me going for my doctorate because I studied identity development and I was studying self-esteem and where that comes from. And I was exploring these topics that were just expanding my mind and my thinking and my perspective. And I just started changing around a lot of that. And like I said, when the car accident hit, it really woke me up because life is short and tomorrow's not promised. And I thought, what am I wasting time for? And so that continued the growth process. And honestly, by the time I turned 50, I was like, I'm fabulous. It's amazing to me, the older I got, the more self-assured and confident that I got about who I was, and that my voice mattered, and that I mattered, and that I was beautiful as I am. We just took a family vacation. We just got back. And I wear bathing suits now that I would wear in my 20s when I didn't have an ounce of celluloid on me. Now, I'm out there look at me. And so
awesome.
I've lost this care of what other people think and have really started valuing more what I think. And I think that was the biggest problem, is that I would listen to what other people would say and think, and how other people would describe beauty or that type of thing, and think, well, if I don't meet that standard, then there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Now realizing that, no, that's your thing. I'm the one that sets the standard for me. And so, but that was a growth and learning process that I had to go through.
Somebody just told me that there was a book that interviewed people as they were dying, and their biggest regret was not living their life according to themselves and worrying about what other people think.
When it comes to regret, we don't regret the things that we do, because we could get over those. What we often regret are the things that we haven't done.
Yeah.
The things that we haven't said, the unspoken words, the paths less chosen, the things that we decided not to do or say are the things that haunt us.
My mom passed away at 46 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I often think about her. I think life is short, but I often just think about how really things do change in your 50s. I would just always wonder what kind of woman she would have blossomed into. She's stuck forever at 46.
It's interesting. My mom passed at 58, and which I'll be soon.
Okay.
My mother, unfortunately, I remember until she died that she never really came into herself. She, I would say, lived a life of regret. She had cancer, but I know in the end, she would always talk about mistakes and things that she wished she had done. And I don't think that she ever allowed herself the freedom to just let that go and just lean into life and where she was. And that's really sad.
Have you been worrying about turning 58 irrationally because your mom passed away at 58?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been interviewing motherless daughters. I'm doing a series because it's a fascinating subject for me. And from 18 to 46, I worried about being 46. And that is so common, even though it's irrational.
Yeah.
And then once you get past the age, it's just so like, oh, I did it.
Yes, that's exactly been the case. I have an older sister, and it was the same thing with her. She was waiting for it. And so I'm waiting my turn to kind of pass the turnstile, past the age to say, oh, I did it.
Yeah.
As it's creeped up, I'm like very cognizant of the fact that my mother passed at 58. I'm like, oh, that's the magic number I have to meet.
I did hear you talk on one interview about how you help women, and you talked about vision boards that weren't what people imagine vision boards to be. I don't know if you still do that, but I have never done a vision board. And so I wonder if you could talk about how yours is different and how it helps you, because maybe I should be doing a vision board.
Yes, I believe in vision boards. I talk a lot about visioning and do workshops with my clients on them, and I insist that they do them too. The difference is it's not just putting some cool pictures that are attractive to you on a piece of paper. It really is a process of taking the time to examine who it is that you want to be and who it is that you want to become.
Okay.
And what that person looks like, what that person is doing, what that person is engaging in. You do separate work around that first to look at the things that you want to do and who that person you're becoming, like what are the things that they have. And then what you place on your vision board is not necessarily those things, but what it takes to do those things.
Oh, okay.
If I wanted to lose weight, instead of putting pictures of me, a skinny body with my head on it, which I think is so bad. That's a horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
What I put are pictures of me working out, of me eating vegetables, of water, of somebody who's walking, someone who's enjoying life and happy and traveling and things of that nature, because that's what I need to do in order to become that person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For me, it's about focusing on the process. This, to me, helps you to really stay present and in the moment and not look at yourself at this end result that you think you should be at and then beat yourself up because you're not there. Because just because I have something on my vision board doesn't mean it's going to come true today or tomorrow. It can be something that comes true next year.
Mm-hmm.
But and everything I put on my board does come to fruition. That, to me, is what's a little bit different. I think most people just look at the end result like, oh, I want that car. Well, what are you going to do to get there? When you put things out there that you're constantly looking at, it's a constant reminder to engage in those things, to make sure that, oh, if this is what I need to be doing, then, okay, every morning as I look at it, I take that in and it just kind of cements in my brain to make sure that that's the path and the process that I'm taking.
Yeah, that's really cool. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it does not make any sense. You're right. To cut your head off and put it on a skinny body.
Yeah. That's just punishment to me. I would look at that every day and feel bad about myself, not excited to look like that.
Right. Right. Exactly. One of the things I've learned recently is that the path to loving yourself is acceptance of yourself. Exactly the way I look. Perfect, 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 with room for improvement.
Yes. Right where you are. I totally agree with that everything starts from loving yourself and loving yourself right now. Because the other thing is that if you don't love yourself now, you are not going to love yourself when you lose weight or get the husband or partner or whatever the case is that you're going after. If you don't love yourself now, you won't get the things that you really desire.
And, we're stuck with ourselves. This is who we've got all day long.
Absolutely.
There's no escape from this person. You might as well treat her well.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep.
My children are grown, so I feel like I can say it, but my priority is me and then you. But it's just like where I have to put the oxygen mask on myself first, because I'm no good to you if I'm not good to me.
In my newsletter last week, I talked about giving from the saucer. If you think of a teacup that's on a saucer, that's what you do. You fill the cup. And then out of the overflow that falls into the saucer, that's where you give everybody
Oh,
else.
good. Yeah.
I have to prioritize me because if I don't fill my cup, there's nothing really left over for anybody else. And if I give out of the cup, then there's definitely nothing left for me. And so you have to keep the cup full and give out of the saucer.
That's awesome. I love that. Do you help women who have trouble with that concept, thinking they have to save the world and fix everything?
I have a lot of women that I have to kind of shift their focus into prioritizing themselves. And because it feels very selfish.
Yeah.
And that just comes from a story or a narrative that they got, that to prioritize themselves is to be selfish, that, they should be giving. And I think women overall are very nurturing, and we tend to give anyway, and to be self-sacrificial in a lot of ways, particularly if we're moms. One client, the power of no was a big thing. I'm like, learn no, and embrace no, love no, tell people no, so that you can prioritize yourself. And by the end of it, I remember she told me, she said it was transformational. It's like, I'm not the same person that I was before. It feels good to prioritize myself. And because I've done that, I'm able to do more.
Right.
Because I'm taking care of myself in a way, and my needs in a way that I wasn't doing before.
And probably do more from your heart, not feel like you have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
How else do you help your clients? What do you do with them? I just caught on to the vision board because I maybe am the only person I know who hasn't done one.
There's 3 phases that I work with my clients on. It is discovery, amplify, and elevate.
Are most of your clients 50s? Are they all ages?
I specifically focus on women at midlife. So they're usually anywhere between 45 and 55, the women that I work with. At midlife, so many people are dealing with adult children, or children who are going to college, or aging parents, or mortgages and retirement and arthritis and menopause. So it's also the time where our career identities are so tightly wound that it takes a moment to not only release that to get your own identity, but to embrace who that identity is outside of that career or whatever it was that, you were doing, or the education that you got, or things of that nature. So there's just a lot to midlife that has to be taken into consideration. And that's why I love focusing particularly on this time of life.
The first conference I went to that I mentioned before FierceCon, they just kept talking the whole weekend about living your purpose and being a dreamer. And then when I went to FierceCon, I kept taking selfies with this lady who didn't like any of the photos of herself. The last day I said, can I take pictures of you to show you your beauty? And I realized that that's where my passion is. And if you had told me 2 weeks before that I was going to embrace a new career, I wouldn't have believed you. So how do the women finally come to that? Yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, is it just whispers they're hearing? I mean, how do you believe it?
That's a great question, because it's a process. If you look at your own experience, first, you didn't do it in isolation. The second thing, you were in communities that were fostering it, that were speaking about it. You were around other people who were doing it. You were hearing words of encouragement that allowed that voice inside you to maybe come alive, to be nourished, to be supported. So that you could have the space to even realize that, oh, maybe there's something else I could be doing. It's all about community. That's a key component of doing it. It cannot be done in isolation, because in isolation, we will talk ourselves out of it.
Right.
The practical voice will kick in. We'll get other people who aren't in that community who will say, what? Are you kidding me? But as you begin to hear it, to get the support, to be in the space of other people who are also in the process, you then start listening a little bit strongly to that voice inside that's been saying to make the turn. And then it becomes unfolded to you in terms of what it is that you're meant to do. It takes about 6 to 9 months before it really sinks in and gels, and you start feeling the confidence and surety to say, this is what I'm going to step into and do.
Do you think you had this nagging knowing
Yeah, I had the nagging knowing. And the thing that kept coming up for me was that at the time I had divorced my first husband. And so I was a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so how would I possibly do that with these kids? And so that just seemed crazy to me. Admittedly, I am remarried. And when I made the leap, I have my husband. When I decided that was it, I was working a full-time job. I told my husband when he came home, I said, I'm quitting my job. And he was shocked because I really, even though he works, he's in sales, it was my income. I was the breadwinner. I was really, everything was dependent upon me. And he was like, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I feel like I'm dying and I have to make a move. I have to do something different. He thought about it. He said, well, we'll make it work. And the next day I called and said, I quit.
Awesome.
I don't often recommend that people do that. But when I was done, I was done. I had heard the voice long enough that I was at the point where I was done. The universe works with you when you finally give in and say yes, because that very day I called the interim provost. And when I called her and I said, you know what? I've been unhappy. You know what I've been going through. I decided to quit. And she said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to treat it like a layoff. We're going to pay you a severance. We're going to cover your insurance. It wasn't what I expected, but it was a clear sign that I had made the right decision.
That's so beautiful. I love that. The world conspires for you, not against you. I like that. And I think it's just believing that makes it so. Well, if somebody wants to work with you but can't yet, is there something you can suggest? Like, is there a book you've read that changed your thought process on things? What do you suggest if somebody can't actually jump into your program?
First of all, I have a lot of resources. If people were to go to my website, at carolparkerwalsh.com and click on resources, I have so many guides and resources that share perspectives and give people ways to walk through the process on their own. Because I want people to have the resources that will support them in that process. In terms of books, it's interesting. I recently wrote a blog on the top 5 books I would say read if you're looking for what you want to do. And one of them is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, but he recently wrote another book. It's called The Genius Zone. What I love about The Big Leap is that it talks about the 4 zones of genius and how too often we stay in the zone of competency, which is stuff we're good at, that people know we're good at. It's a very comfortable zone. But when we finally realize what our zone of genius is, which to me I akin to what your purpose is and what you're meant to do in the world, boy, once you release and step into that, then everything unfolds. I also love The 4 Agreements.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a good book to read. And there's another book called The Seed by John Gordon. And what I love about that book is that he uses a fable or a story of someone going through like, what's my purpose, to tell the story of how you can step into that.
Oh, awesome.
Those are some great resources, but I definitely have some that I think could really help that are on my website as well. carolparkerwalsh.com.
This has really just been so great. I'm so glad to chat with you. I really loved meeting you at FierceCon, and I just thought you were so great. And I just love the confidence you exude. And I like knowing now that you are this lovely human who is all that.
Oh, thank you, Hera. I mean, this has been great. I am honored to be a guest on your show. Thank you for having me and remembering.